All right, let's dive into another deep dives. Today we're tackling Virgo relationships.
Ooh, Virgos.
And not just the romantic kind.
Ah,
We're going to be talking about all sorts of connections that Virgos have.
that's right.
And our source material for this one is a really fun episode
Okay,
of a Spanish language relationship advice podcast
cool.
called Se pegó el texto.
Okay.
So, we get a lot of requests for information about Virgos.
Uh-huh.
And so we want to get really specific about, maybe you're dating a Virgo. Maybe you have a Virgo as a friend.
Yeah,
Maybe you are a Virgo and you want a little self-knowledge.
right.
So we're going to be talking about what makes them tick in love, what makes them run for the hills, what are their sort of practical, analytical minds, how do those come into play?
Absolutely. And we're going to go beyond that typical, Virgos are so organized.
Right.
We're going to really get into, their earth sign energy and all that.
Yeah, exactly. And how does that influence what their ideal partner is?
Yeah.
And, we'll talk about specific Zodiac pairings and, some click, some don't.
Yeah, some need work.
So are you ready to get into the minds of Virgos?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So to win a Virgo's heart, you need more than just charm.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's going to be a process.
It's like a vetting process.
Absolutely. Virgos approach relationships just like they approach everything else.
Okay.
Meticulously.
Uh-huh.
Don't forget, they are ruled by Mercury,
Right.
the planet of communication and analysis.
Okay.
So before they commit, they're going to be observing how you think, how you act,
Wow.
how you treat the barista,
Everything.
everything.
Okay, so that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah,
But does that also mean that once they're in, they're all in?
100%.
Like no wishy-washy stuff.
Yeah, once a Virgo commits, they don't take that decision lightly.
Right.
They have weighed all the pros and cons, every angle, and they have decided that you are worth it.
Wow.
So that's why they're known for their loyalty, their dedication.
Okay, so knowing that they're so discerning makes me even more curious about how they express affection.
Uh-huh.
What is the Virgo love language?
Okay, so you can forget the grand romantic gestures.
Okay.
Think more curated practicality.
Okay.
It's about anticipating your needs before you even say them.
Wow.
Streamlining your life, making sure you have everything you need to thrive.
So less roses and serenades, more like remembering your dentist appointment.
Exactly.
Or making sure you have an umbrella if it's going to rain.
Yes, precisely. Those little thoughtful gestures that show they're always thinking of you
Oh, that's so sweet.
and your well-being.
I love it. It's like a subtle form of problem solving, which
Yeah.
makes sense because they have such analytical minds.
Uh-huh.
So with this unique approach to love, what kind of person can really resonate with that energy?
Okay.
What is it that a Virgo seeks in a partner?
So they are drawn to intelligence,
Okay.
emotional stability, and a shared ambition for growth.
Yeah.
They need someone on their level intellectually,
Right.
someone who can keep up with those stimulating conversations,
Yeah.
and also someone who understands their need for order and structure.
Yeah, which makes total sense because they're an earth sign.
Exactly.
They crave that stable foundation in their environment and in their relationships.
Yes.
So I'm guessing anything that disrupts that is like a big no-no.
Huge no-no.
Mm.
So chaos, lack of commitment, emotional outbursts,
Yeah.
those challenge a Virgo's sense of order and security.
Yeah, I always imagine it's like if you have this perfectly organized bookshelf
Uh-huh.
and then someone comes in and just starts randomly rearranging things,
Oh my gosh.
that would drive a Virgo up the wall.
That is the perfect analogy because Virgos find comfort in predictability
Right.
and structure.
Yeah.
It allows their mind to relax and focus on other things.
Uh-huh.
So when that is disrupted,
Right.
it can be really unsettling for them.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how this need for order
Mhm.
also kind of ties into their compatibility with other signs.
Yeah.
So, we know earth signs generally do well together.
Right.
But I'm curious about these wild card pairings.
Yeah.
What does Se pegó texto say about signs that might surprise us?
So before we dive into specific signs, let's just talk about elements.
Okay.
So remember, Virgo is Earth.
Uh-huh.
So they're going to naturally gravitate towards other Earth signs like Taurus,
Right.
Capricorn.
Okay.
They share that grounded, practical approach to life.
Makes sense.
But what's really fascinating is how they interact with water signs.
Water and earth.
Yes.
Interesting combo.
Fertile.
But water signs are so emotional
Claire.
and sometimes unpredictable.
Yes.
So how does that play out with the Virgo's need for stability?
It's all about balance.
Okay.
Water signs like Cancer
Okay.
and Scorpio can actually complement a Virgo personality.
Okay.
Cancer's nurturing, intuitive nature can soften Virgo's sometimes critical edge,
Right.
and create emotional security.
Yeah, I see that.
And Scorpio, with all of their intensity and depth, can challenge Virgo to step outside that comfort zone, explore their own emotional depths.
Oh, wow. So opposites attract, but in a way that actually works.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool.
But like any relationship, it takes effort, understanding, and a willingness to embrace the differences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So speaking of differences,
Yes.
what about the signs that maybe clashed a bit more with Virgo style?
Okay.
Like I'm thinking those fiery, spontaneous types.
Yeah, you're thinking about fire signs like
yeah.
Aries, Leo, Sagittarius.
Yeah, exactly.
So with their impulsive, energetic nature,
Right.
they can sometimes feel a bit overwhelming for a Virgo
Makes sense.
who prefers a more planned, measured approach to life.
Yeah, it's like trying to mix oil and water.
Exactly.
It just doesn't work.
And then we also have the air signs,
Right.
like Gemini,
Oh.
known for their mental agility,
Yeah.
their constant need for stimulation.
Right.
And while Virgos do appreciate intelligence, a Gemini's tendency to flit from one thing to the next can clash with Virgo's need for focus and grounding.
Right. So for those pairings to work,
Yeah.
it's going to take a lot of mutual understanding
Yes.
and willingness to adapt.
100%. And that is where communication becomes so important.
Yes.
Both partners need to be open and willing to express their needs.
Uh-huh.
Find ways to compromise.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've talked about how Virgos approach romantic relationships.
Right.
How they vibe with different elements.
Yeah.
But what about other connections?
Okay.
What's it like to have a Virgo as a friend?
Okay.
What can people expect from that dynamic?
Imagine the most loyal, supportive friend you can have.
Okay.
Someone who is always there for you, ready to offer practical solutions,
Right.
help you through any problem.
Okay, that's amazing. But is there a catch?
Well,
Because we know Virgos love to analyze.
yes.
So are they constantly critiquing their friends too?
They might be a little too direct sometimes,
Yeah.
offering advice even when you haven't asked for it. Right. And they're not always the most emotionally expressive,
Okay.
which can be frustrating for those who need that verbal affirmation.
Right, so appreciate their practical support.
Yes.
Don't take their critiques personally.
Yeah.
They genuinely want to help you improve.
Exactly. Virgos are all about growth and improvement for themselves and for those they care about.
I love that. So it's like having a personal life coach
Yes.
who also happens to be incredibly loyal and always has your back.
That is a great way to put it.
Awesome.
All right.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit.
Okay.
Let's step into the workplace.
All right.
Imagine a colleague who is meticulous, disciplined, analytical, and incredibly efficient.
Ooh.
That is a Virgo coworker.
Okay.
They get things done.
Yeah.
And they do them well.
They do.
But I'm guessing there's a flip side to this too, right?
Of course.
Their need for perfection probably comes with some challenges in a work environment.
Well, they can be overly critical at times.
Right.
And they might be resistant to change, especially if it disrupts their carefully crafted routines.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm.
So how do you successfully navigate working with a Virgo?
Okay.
Any tips for people who might be dealing with a Virgo boss or coworker?
Embrace organization.
Okay.
Be open to feedback
Huh.
and acknowledge their hard work
Right.
because it's likely they won't brag about it themselves.
Well, it's a good point. It sounds like the key to working with a Virgo is to appreciate their strengths,
Yeah,
but also understand their need for structure and clear communication.
exactly.
Awesome.
Mm.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've explored how Virgos navigate romantic relationships,
Mm-hmm.
friendships, and even the workplace.
Yes.
But there's so much more to uncover about this fascinating sign.
Oh, yeah.
So what else can we delve into when it comes to understanding the Virgo mindset?
Well, next we can dive into some real-life examples of what it's like to be in a relationship with a Virgo, as told by the experts on Se Pegó el Texto. They offer some fascinating insights into those day-to-day dynamics
Okay.
and how to make the most of this unique connection.
That sounds like a must listen.
Oh.
All right, listeners, get ready for even more Virgo revelations when we come back for part 2 of this deep dive.
Yes. Welcome back to our Virgo exploration. Before we get into like the specifics of, Virgo compatibility,
Right.
we were talking about, the dynamics of having a Virgo as a friend or a colleague.
Yeah.
So let's shift our focus a little bit to what Se Pegó el Texto reveals about like the romantic relationships.
Yeah, let's do it.
With this complex earth sign.
Okay, so from what we've uncovered so far, Virgos seem to bring a lot to the table.
Yeah.
Loyalty, dedication,
Mm-hmm.
a very practical approach to love.
Uh-huh.
But I'm curious, what do the experts highlight as like the absolute best parts of being in a relationship with a Virgo?
Okay, so they emphasize that a Virgo's love is a slow burn,
Okay.
but once ignited, it burns bright and steady.
Okay.
They talk about this unwavering loyalty
Wow.
as a defining characteristic of Virgo partners. When they choose to be with you, it's because they genuinely see a future,
Right?
a partnership built on mutual respect and shared goals.
So it's safe to say that fleeting romances aren't really their thing.
No, they're not interested in playing games or chasing butterflies.
Got it.
They crave depth and substance in their connections.
Makes sense.
And once they find it, their commitment is unwavering.
Okay, so we talked about how their love language revolves around acts of service.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to hear how that translates to the day-to-day reality of a relationship.
Okay.
What are some specific examples that the podcast offers?
All right, so picture this. You come home
Okay.
to a perfectly organized pantry.
All right. I like it already.
Your favorite meal is waiting on the table.
Okay.
And there's a thoughtful note reminding you about that appointment you totally forgot about.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like having a personal assistant who also happens to be your soulmate.
Exactly. But it goes beyond just those practical aspects.
Okay.
Virgos also excel at offering support and encouragement. The podcast actually compares them to personal life coaches,
Really?
always pushing their partners to grow,
Interesting.
to strive for their best selves and celebrate every milestone along the way.
So a Virgo partner is someone who champions your dreams.
Yes,
And also helps you fold laundry.
exactly. That's quite a combo.
It is a good combo.
Yeah,
But let's be real. No sign is perfect.
true.
So while the podcast definitely highlights these perks of being with a Virgo,
Yeah,
I'm sure they also delve into some of the challenges.
of course.
What are some potential stumbling blocks that listeners should be aware of?
So the podcast hosts don't shy away from addressing the areas where Virgos might stumble in relationships.
Right?
And unsurprisingly, their tendency towards perfectionism tops the list.
It's that classic double-edged sword.
Yeah,
Their high standards are a blessing and a curse.
exactly. While it's great to have a partner who motivates you to be your best self,
Uh-huh.
their critiques, even when well-intentioned, can sometimes feel a bit harsh. And the podcast really emphasizes it's not about being mean-spirited.
Yeah.
It stems from this deep-seated desire to see things done right, to constantly strive for improvement.
It's like having an internal editor who's constantly pointing out typos.
Yes.
Not just in your writing, but as like every aspect of your life.
Yes, and while this attention to detail can be helpful in some situations,
Right.
it can also create tension if the partner is more sensitive to criticism.
Yeah.
So the podcast stresses the importance of open communication and understanding in these situations.
So a healthy dose of reassurance.
Yes,
And maybe a reminder that not everything needs to be perfect all the time.
exactly. Another challenge that the podcast highlights is the Virgo tendency to struggle with expressing emotions openly.
Right. We did touch upon this a little bit when we talked about their love language.
He did.
But I'm curious to hear how this emotional reserve plays out in a relationship beyond those practical expressions of love.
So the podcast hosts remind us that while Virgos feel deeply, they often struggle to articulate those feelings verbally.
Okay.
They're not the type to gush with compliments
Right.
or pour their heart out in these grand romantic gestures.
So their partners might need to learn to read between the lines,
Yes.
so to speak,
Yeah.
to understand that those acts of service are, in their own way,
Right.
a form of profound emotional expression.
Exactly. And it's not that they don't want to express their feelings.
Okay.
It's more that they feel more comfortable showing their love through these concrete actions
Right.
rather than flowery words.
It's almost like their analytical minds have a hard time translating emotions into language.
Yes.
It's much easier for them to show you how they feel by doing something tangible for you.
Yes. And the podcast emphasizes that understanding this is crucial for navigating a successful relationship with a Virgo.
Right.
It's about appreciating their unique way of communicating love and recognizing that sometimes actions speak louder than words.
Okay, so we talked about perfectionism, we talked about emotional reserve.
Yes.
Are there any other potential hurdles that the podcast mentions
Yes.
that listeners should be aware of?
The hosts spend some time discussing the Virgo need for control,
Okay.
particularly how it manifests in a relationship dynamic.
Okay, so this kind of aligns with what we've been talking about with their love for order and structure.
Yes.
But how does this desire for control play out in the day-to-day flow of a partnership?
So Virgos thrive in predictable environments,
Right.
They like to plan to organize, to have a sense of order in their lives.
Okay.
And this often extends to their relationships.
Right.
And the podcast hosts point out that while this can create a sense of stability and security, it can also feel a bit stifling for partners who are more spontaneous and free-spirited.
Right. So it's about finding a balance between spontaneity and structure.
Exactly.
Too much of either can throw off the harmony
Absolutely.
in a relationship.
And the podcast suggests open communication is key.
Okay.
You know, partners need to express their needs and be willing to compromise.
Yeah.
Maybe it's about creating space for both planned outings and those impromptu adventures.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's about respecting each other's needs while also finding ways to step outside those comfort zones.
Yes.
And experience something new together.
Exactly. And now, shifting gears slightly, let's revisit Virgo anger.
Okay.
Specifically, how it manifests in relationships.
Right.
The podcast delves into this, and I think it's a valuable insight for listeners who might be navigating a disagreement with a Virgo partner.
Okay, so we briefly touched on this earlier.
Yes.
Mentioning that they're not prone to, like, explosive outbursts.
Right.
But I'm curious to hear how Pacifico El Texto describes a Virgo's reaction when they're upset or frustrated.
So the podcast hosts emphasize that a Virgo's anger is often internalized.
Okay.
Remember, they're ruled by Mercury,
the
planet of communication and analysis.
Right.
So instead of yelling or lashing out, they're more likely to retreat into their minds, replay the situation, dissect every word and action, trying to logically understand what went wrong.
It's almost like their mind becomes a crime scene, and they're the detective trying to piece together the evidence.
That's a perfect analogy.
I like it.
And during this processing phase, they might become distant or withdrawn.
Okay.
Their partner might notice that they're becoming quieter, more introspective, lost in thought as they try to analyze the situation.
So what's the best way to approach a Virgo partner who's in this, like, analytical mode?
Okay.
Is it best to give them space or to try to talk things through?
The podcast host suggests that giving them space is often the best initial approach.
Good.
Remember, they need time to process their emotions logically. Trying to force a conversation before they've had that time might lead to more frustration.
So it's about respecting their need for space.
Yes.
And understanding that their silence isn't necessarily a sign of disengagement. It's a sign that they're working through things internally.
Exactly. And once they've had that time to process, they'll be more open to having a calm, rational discussion about the situation.
So this makes me wonder, is there a specific way to approach that conversation?
Yeah.
To make sure that it's productive?
Yes.
And doesn't trigger more that, like, analytical withdrawal?
The podcast offers some great tips for this.
Okay.
They advise listeners to approach the conversation from a place of understanding and logic. Avoid getting emotional or accusatory. Instead, focus on clearly expressing your perspective and offering solutions.
Got it.
Rather than just dwelling on the problem.
So it's about appealing to their problem-solving nature.
Yes.
To present the issue as something to be analyzed and resolved together.
Yes.
Rather than like a source of blame or conflict.
Precisely. Remember, Virgos are all about finding practical solutions.
Right.
So framing the conversation this way will make them feel more at ease and encourage a more constructive dialogue.
This has been so insightful. I feel like we've gained a much deeper understanding of the intricacies of being in a relationship with a Virgo.
Awesome.
But before we move on, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
The idea of Virgo compatibility with other signs.
Right.
I'm particularly intrigued by the pairings that might surprise us.
Okay.
Can we delve a little bit deeper into those, like, unexpected matches?
Absolutely. So we touched upon how Earth signs naturally gravitate towards each other.
Right.
That grounded, stable energy creates this really solid foundation for a relationship.
Yeah.
But what Sipigot Dixto highlights is how Virgos can also find deep connection with water signs.
Okay.
Despite their seemingly opposite natures.
This is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Water signs like Cancer and Scorpio are known for their emotional depth and intensity.
Yes.
And on the surface, it seems like that would clash with a Virgo's need for logic and control. So what does the podcast say about how these seemingly opposing forces actually complement each other?
So they explain that the key lies in the balance that these elements create.
Okay.
Water nourishes Earth, helping it to thrive and grow.
Okay.
And in a similar way, the emotional depth of water signs can soften a Virgo's sometimes rigid edges.
Right.
creating a sense of warmth and security that allows them to open up emotionally.
So it's about finding a balance between the head and the heart.
Yes.
The logical and the emotional.
Yes.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these seemingly different energies can actually create a really beautiful synergy.
Yes.
But I'm curious to hear how specific water signs play into this dynamic.
Okay.
So let's start with Cancer.
Okay.
What does the podcast say about a Virgo-Cancer pairing?
So they described this match as having the potential for deep emotional connection.
Okay.
And understanding Cancer's nurturing, intuitive nature can create a safe space for Virgo to express their vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
They provide that emotional support that a Virgo might not even realize they need.
It sounds like a very sweet and tender pairing.
Yeah.
A safe haven where both partners can feel seen and appreciated for who they truly are.
Absolutely. What about Scorpio?
Okay, Scorpio. They're known for their intensity and passion.
Yes.
Which seem a bit more volatile than Cancer's gentle energy.
Right.
So how does that play out with a Virgo?
The podcast describes this pairing as a case of opposites attract.
Okay.
But in a way that actually works. Scorpio's intensity can challenge a Virgo to step outside of their comfort zone, explore their own hidden depths.
Yeah.
They bring a spark of passion and excitement that can ignite a fire within a Virgo's more reserved nature.
It sounds like a very transformative relationship.
It is.
Where both partners push each other to grow and evolve.
Yeah.
But I can also imagine some potential for clashes.
Of course.
Especially given Scorpio's tendency for possessiveness.
Right.
And Virgo's need for independence. So how does the podcast address that?
They acknowledge that this is where communication and compromise become paramount. Both partners need to be willing to understand and respect each other's needs. Scorpio needs to learn to give Virgo the space that they require.
Right.
And Virgo needs to be open to expressing their emotions more freely to reassure Scorpio of their commitment.
So it sounds like a relationship with the potential for incredible highs.
Yes.
And maybe some turbulent lows.
Yeah.
A roller coaster ride of emotions and growth.
Absolutely.
But for those who are willing to put in the work,
yes,
it can be a truly transformative experience.
100%. Now, we focus a lot on the water signs.
Right.
But what about those fire and air signs that we mentioned earlier?
Right. Are those relationships destined for disaster?
Okay.
Or is there hope for those pairings as well?
The podcast doesn't paint them as impossible.
Okay.
But they do acknowledge that they require a lot more effort and understanding to navigate successfully.
Okay.
So let's start with fire signs.
Okay.
Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius.
Yeah. What are some potential challenges those pairings might face?
Okay.
Well, I can imagine a clash of styles, for starters.
Yes.
Fire signs are all about spontaneity and impulsiveness, whereas Virgos thrive on routine and predictability.
Yeah.
It seems like their approaches to life are just fundamentally different.
You're right. And the podcast points out that this clash of styles can create friction in the relationship.
Right.
For example, a fiery Aries might want to jet off on a last-minute adventure.
Right.
While a Virgo partner would prefer to meticulously plan every detail weeks in advance.
And a Leo's need to be the center of attention might clash with Virgo's more understated nature.
Yes.
And then there's Sagittarius with their free-spirited, adventurous vibe. It seems like they'd constantly be pulling a Virgo out of their comfort zone.
Right.
Which might not always be a welcome experience.
Exactly. And the podcast emphasizes that these pairings can work. But it requires a conscious effort from both partners to understand and respect each other's differences.
Okay.
Fire signs need to be mindful of Virgo's need for structure and predictability, while Virgos need to be open to embracing a bit more spontaneity and adventure in their lives.
So it sounds like a lot of compromise is required for these relationships to flourish.
It does. What about air signs?
Okay, yeah, air signs. How do they fare with a Virgo?
So the podcast highlights Gemini as a particularly challenging match for Virgo.
Okay.
Geminis are known for their mental agility and their constant need for stimulation. And while Virgos appreciate intelligence, a Gemini's tendency to flit from one thing to the next can be overwhelming for a Virgo who craves focus and grounding.
It's almost like their energies are moving at different speeds.
Yes.
A Gemini's mind is constantly buzzing with ideas and possibilities, while a Virgo prefers to carefully analyze and process one thing at a time. So it seems like that could create a lot of miscommunication and frustration.
Exactly. And the podcast suggests that for this pairing to work, Both partners need to be willing to meet in the middle.
Okay.
Geminis need to learn to slow down and appreciate a Virgo's methodical approach.
Right.
While Virgos need to be open to embracing a bit more mental flexibility and spontaneity.
So it's not about changing who you are.
Right.
But rather about finding ways to bridge those differences.
Yes.
And create a dynamic that works for both partners.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of astrology. It's not about putting people in boxes or dictating who they should or shouldn't be with. It's about understanding the energies at play and using that knowledge to navigate relationships with more awareness and compassion.
Absolutely. This has been such a fascinating exploration of Virgo relationships.
It has.
We've covered everything from their unique love language to the challenges and rewards of being in a romantic partnership with this complex earth sign.
Right.
But before we wrap up,
I
want to circle back to something we discussed earlier.
Okay.
The idea of Virgos as incredible friends.
Yes.
Can we delve a little bit deeper into that dynamic?
Absolutely. So while the podcast focuses primarily on romantic relationships, they do touch upon the special qualities that Virgos bring to friendships.
Okay.
They describe them as the most loyal and supportive friends you could ask for.
Yep.
Always there to offer practical help and insightful advice.
We talked about how they might be a bit too direct with their feedback sometimes.
Yeah.
But it always comes from a place of genuine care.
Yeah.
It's their way of showing that they want to see their friends grow and thrive. But are there any other aspects of Virgo friendships that the podcast highlights?
They mention that Virgos are often the glue.
Really?
That holds a friend group together.
Interesting.
They're the ones who organize gatherings.
Okay.
Remember birthdays and make sure everyone feels included.
Yeah.
They thrive on creating a sense of harmony and connection within their social circles.
It sounds like they bring that same practicality.
They do.
And attention to detail to their friendships as they do to their romantic relationships.
Exactly. And while they might not always be the most emotionally expressive, their actions speak volumes. They're the friends who will show up with a casserole when you're sick. Help you move apartments or listen patiently while you vent about your problem.
They're the ones who are always there for you no matter what.
Exactly.
That kind of loyalty and support is invaluable in any friendship.
100%. And now, let's shift our focus to the final piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
Virgos in the workplace.
All right, look through.
We touched upon this briefly earlier, mentioning their meticulousness and efficiency. But I'm curious to hear what Se Pegó el Texto has to say about this aspect of their lives.
From what we've learned so far, I can imagine they excel in roles that require attention to detail, organization, and a problem-solving mindset. But I'm also curious to hear about the challenges they might face in a professional setting. Particularly given their perfectionism and their aversion to chaos.
Well, before we delve into those specifics, let's set the stage by painting a picture of the typical Virgo work style. Imagine a colleague who arrives at the office with a meticulously organized desk.
I love it.
A to-do list that's color-coded and prioritized. And a laser-like focus on getting things done.
It sounds like they'd be the dream employee.
They are.
The ones who always meet deadlines. Catch errors before they become problems. Keep projects running smoothly.
That's precisely what the podcast highlights. They describe Virgos as the ultimate team players. Reliable, efficient, and always willing to go the extra mile to ensure things are done right.
They seem like the kind of people you'd want on your side when tackling a complex project.
100%.
But I'm also curious to hear how their perfectionism plays out in a work environment. Does it ever create tension or conflict?
The podcast acknowledges that their high standards can sometimes lead to friction. Particularly if they're working with colleagues who have a more relaxed approach to deadlines or quality control.
Yeah, I can imagine a scenario where a Virgo coworker is like meticulously proofreading a document. While their teammate is like throwing together a presentation last minute. That could definitely lead to some clashing work styles.
Exactly. And the podcast suggests that open communication is key to navigating these situations. Virgos need to learn to communicate their expectations clearly and respectfully. While their colleagues need to understand that their attention to detail isn't about being controlling. It's about a genuine desire to produce high-quality work.
It's about finding a way to balance those different approaches to work and create a dynamic that allows everyone to thrive.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Now, as we conclude this deep dive
Yeah.
into the fascinating world of Virgos,
It has been
I
fascinating.
want to leave our listeners with a final thought.
Okay. I'm all ears. What's the most important takeaway that you want listeners to remember about this complex and often misunderstood Earth sign?
I think it's crucial to remember that Virgos, despite their sometimes critical nature, are driven by a deep desire to make things better.
Okay.
They approach everything in life with a sense of purpose and a genuine desire to improve not just themselves, but the world around them.
So it's not about being picky or controlling. It's about striving for excellence in all aspects of their lives.
Exactly. And while their methods might not always be conventional, their heart is always in the right place.
That's a beautiful way to sum it up.
Thank you.
So to all the Virgos out there, embrace your analytical minds, your dedication to excellence, and your unwavering loyalty.
Yes.
And to those who are fortunate enough to have Virgos in their lives, whether as romantic partners, friends, or colleagues, appreciate their unique gifts and the special kind of love and support they offer.
Absolutely. And for those of you who are eager to continue exploring the fascinating world of astrology, stay tuned for our next deep dive.
I'm excited.
Where we'll unravel the mysteries of another captivating zodiac sign.
Awesome.
Until then, keep those minds curious and those hearts open.
All right, so we're back and ready to wrap up our Virgo deep dive.
Yes, part 3.
We've covered so much ground.
I know.
Their love language, their compatibility with other signs, even how they handle disagreements.
Yes.
But there's one more area I think we really need to unpack, and that's Virgos in the workplace.
Of course. Se pegó el texto has some really interesting insights about that.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear it, because from what we've learned so far, I just imagine a Virgo walking into the office with like a perfectly organized briefcase, a to-do list that's color-coded
of course,
and prioritized.
Yes.
And this laser focus on just getting things done.
You are spot on. The podcast describes them as like the ultimate professionals. Always prepared, punctual, detail-oriented.
Makes sense.
They really thrive in those structured environments where they can apply their analytical skills and problem-solving abilities.
So they sound like the type of colleagues who always meet their deadlines.
Oh, yeah.
They catch errors before they become like major issues.
Yes.
And just keep projects running smoothly.
That's exactly what they said.
I love that.
They're the ones you want on your team if you have a big project to tackle.
Absolutely. But I'm also curious about how their perfectionism plays out in that team setting.
Okay.
Like, does it ever create any tension or conflict?
The podcast does say that that can be a challenge.
Okay.
While those high standards are definitely an asset in a lot of ways. They can also lead to some tension, especially if they're working with colleagues who have a more relaxed approach to deadlines or quality control.
I can imagine like a Virgo coworker who's meticulously proofreading a report, and then their teammate is like scrambling to finish a presentation at the last minute.
Yeah.
Totally different work style.
Oh, yeah. That's definitely going to cause some frustration.
Right.
And they have some good advice for that.
Okay. What is it?
Clear and respectful communication.
Okay.
Virgos need to learn to express their expectations in a way that doesn't come across as critical or judgmental.
So instead of pointing out every single flaw, it's about offering constructive feedback.
Yes.
Focusing on solutions rather than dwelling on the problems.
Exactly. And then on the flip side, their colleagues need to understand that a Virgo's attention to detail isn't about being controlling. It's about a genuine desire to produce really high quality work.
So it's really just about finding that middle ground.
Yes.
Where both parties feel respected and understood.
Exactly. Now, we've talked about how they excel in these structured environments. Are there any specific industries or roles that the podcast highlights as being particularly well-suited to their strengths?
Interesting.
So they specifically mentioned fields like accounting research, data analysis, and healthcare.
Oh, that makes total sense.
Yeah. Those professions require precision, attention to detail, and a really methodical approach to problem solving.
Yeah, a Virgo's analytical mind would really thrive in those roles.
100%.
But what about some of those less desirable traits?
Okay.
You know, we know that they can be critical.
Yes.
They can be resistant to change.
Right.
How do those aspects of their personality kind of play out in the workplace?
So the podcast talks about the importance of self-awareness for Virgos.
Okay.
They need to recognize that their critiques, even though they're well-intentioned,
Right.
can sometimes come across as harsh
Yeah.
or demoralizing to colleagues.
So it's about learning to deliver feedback in a way that's constructive and encouraging.
Yes.
Rather than critical or demeaning.
Exactly. And when it comes to their resistance to change,
Yeah, how do they deal with that?
the podcast suggests that they can benefit from kind of reframing their perspective.
Okay.
Instead of viewing change as a threat to their routines, they can try to see it as an opportunity for growth and improvement.
It's about finding a way to balance that need for structure.
Yes.
With just the inevitable fluidity
Yeah.
of the workplace.
Right. All right. Well, as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I want to leave our listeners with one final thought about Virgos.
Okay. I'm all ears. What is it?
I think it's important to remember that beneath that sometimes critical exterior lies a heart of gold. Virgos are driven by a deep sense of compassion.
Okay.
And a genuine desire to make the world a better place.
I love that.
They might not always express it in the most effusive ways,
Right.
but their actions speak volumes.
So it's about looking beyond the surface, appreciating their unique strengths.
Yes.
And understanding that their intentions are always good.
Yeah.
Even if their delivery isn't always perfect.
Exactly. And for anyone who's lucky enough to have Virgos in their lives, whether as romantic partners, friends, colleagues, embrace those unique gifts.
Right.
And celebrate that unwavering loyalty and dedication that they bring.
Absolutely. This has been such an enlightening journey into the world of Virgo.
It really has.
We've debunked myths, uncovered hidden depths.
Yes.
And I think gained a much deeper appreciation.
I hope so.
For this fascinating sign.
And for those of you who are eager to keep exploring the intricacies of astrology, stay tuned for our next deep dive.
Yeah, wait.
We'll unravel the mysteries of another captivating zodiac sign.
Awesome. Until then, keep those minds curious and those hearts open.
Yes.